Every person has a personality, a distinct and relatively stable pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving. It's what makes one person steady and introspective, and another lively and impulsive. But where does that pattern come from? Are we shaped by early experiences, by biology, or by conscious choice? Over time, psychologists have offered many answers. Freud looked inward, to the hidden desires and early childhood experiences. The Neo-Freudians, Jung, Adler, and Horney, kept his focus on the inner world, but replaced sexual conflict with growth, mastery, and security. Trait theorists stepped back and asked how to measure personality objectively. Let's examine how each one envisioned personality development across the lifespan. Freud, the foundations of personality. Freud began as a neurologist trying to understand patients whose physical symptoms had no biological cause. He concluded that the roots were psychological, buried in the unconscious. From that insight grew psychoanalysis, his theory of personality and therapy. He saw the mind as layered like an iceberg. The conscious mind is the tip above water, what we're aware of. Just below it lies the preconscious, where memories and ideas await recall. Beneath both is the vast unconscious, a reservoir of repressed thoughts, fears, and wishes that silently guide behavior. Personality, in Freud's view, is a balance among three forces: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is instinctive, driven by the pleasure principle. I want it now. The ego, guided by the reality principle, mediates between desire and the world's limits. The superego represents internalized moral standards, our sense of right and wrong. Imagine spotting a chocolate cake while on a diet. The id urges indulgence, the superego scolds, and the ego brokers peace. One slice, then stop. Too much ID leads to impulsiveness. Too much superego to guilt and rigidity. To protect itself from inner tension, the ego uses defense mechanisms: repression, denial, projection, displacement, regression, rationalization, and sublimation. These defenses help us manage anxiety, but can distort reality if overused. Freud described personality growth through 5 psychosexual stages, each centered on pleasure and conflict. Oral stage, birth 18 months. The infant gains comfort through the mouth. Too much or too little gratification can lead to adult dependency or oral habits, like overeating or smoking. Anal stage, E2, 1 to 3 years. Toilet training becomes a lesson in control. Strict training breeds orderliness, anal retentive. Lenient training produces messiness, anal expulsive. Phallic stage, 3 to 6 years. Attention turns to the genitals and family dynamics. Through the Oedipus and Electra complexes, children identify with the same-sex parent, forming the superego. Latency stage, 6 to 12 years, sexual energy quiets. Focus shifts to learning, friendships, and skills. Genital stage, adolescence onward. Mature sexuality and responsibility emerge. Freud's stages ended in adolescence. By then, he believed, personality was largely set. Modern psychology disputes the details but still credits Freud with showing that early experience and unconscious motives shape who we become. Jung, the lifelong process of individuation. Carl Jung began as Freud's student, but soon diverged. He accepted the unconscious but saw it as broader and more spiritual. Alongside the personal unconscious, our own memories and emotions, Jung proposed a collective unconscious, shared by all humanity and filled with archetypes, universal symbols like the hero, the mother, and the shadow. These archetypes appear in myths, dreams, and art, guiding human behavior and shaping our understanding of meaning. Jung also identified 2 attitudes, introversion and extroversion, and 4 functions of consciousness: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. Each person's personality develops from the interplay of these elements. For Jung, development doesn't end in childhood. It unfolds in stages of individuation, the process of integrating the parts of the self into a unified whole. In early childhood, the ego forms as the child differentiates self from others. During adolescence and early adulthood, the persona, or social mask, develops the roles we play to fit expectations. Around midlife, the person encounters the shadow, the denied or repressed aspects of their personality, and begins to reconcile with them. In late adulthood, growth involves integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects into the self, the total and balanced psyche. Freud believed that personality is largely fixed early. Jung believed it continues to evolve toward wholeness. A midlife career change, a spiritual awakening, or the reconciliation of long-avoided aspects of oneself all represent this ongoing process of individuation. Adler, the drive for mastery and contribution. Alfred Adler rejected Freud's emphasis on sexuality and saw the central human motive as the striving for superiority, the urge to overcome feelings of inferiority that begin in childhood. Every child experiences helplessness and dependence. This sense of inferiority sparks a lifelong process. In early childhood, the individual begins to compensate for weakness. During school years, skills and achievements build confidence. In adolescence and adulthood, the striving broadens into mastery and contribution to others. In later life, mature people turn their energy toward community and legacy. Healthy compensation produces courage and cooperation. Unhealthy compensation becomes either an inferiority complex, feeling incapable, or a superiority complex, covering insecurity with arrogance. Adler also proposed that birth order shapes development. Firstborns may become responsible and organized, but fear losing status. Middle children may grow competitive or adaptable. Youngest children often become charming or dependent. Only children develop early maturity, but may struggle with sharing attention. At the center of Adler's theory is the creative self, the ability to choose and shape one's path. Development is not fate, but direction. The movement from self-concern toward social interest, the desire to contribute to the welfare of others. Horney, the search for security and connection. Karen Horney emphasized that the foundation of personality is not sexuality or power, but basic anxiety, the feeling of helplessness in a potentially hostile world. Whether children feel safe or threatened depends on the consistency of love and care in early life. In response to anxiety, children develop patterns of coping that crystallize into adult personality styles. Moving toward others, seeking approval and affection through compliance and dependence. Moving against others, seeking control through aggression and dominance. Moving away from others, seeking independence through withdrawal and detachment. These strategies begin in childhood as survival responses. But if they become rigid, they solidify into what Horney called neurotic trends, persistent ways of relating that cause distress in adulthood. Development continues as people gain awareness of these patterns and learn to balance them. With supportive relationships and self-understanding, the individual can move beyond anxiety toward genuine growth and connection. Horney's theory highlights that personality is shaped by relationships and culture, and that change remains possible throughout life when security replaces fear. Trait theories, describing stability and change. By the mid-20th century, psychologists sought to make personality study more empirical. Instead of explaining personality through inner conflicts, trait theorists asked what consistent characteristics could be identified and measured. Gordon Allport emphasized individuality. He described 3 levels of traits: cardinal traits, rare but dominant, such as honesty or ambition; central traits, general characteristics like kindness or shyness; secondary traits, situational preferences like taste in music or nervousness before public speaking. Personality develops as these traits become organized and stable through experience. Early habits form into central traits, and maturity brings coherence and purpose. Raymond Cattell refined this approach using factor analysis, reducing thousands of trait words to 16 core personality factors, such as warmth, dominance, and sensitivity. He developed the 16PF test, showing that traits can predict work, relationships, and adjustment. Hans Eysenck went further, arguing that traits have biological roots. He identified 3 major dimensions: extraversion, introversion, neuroticism, stability, and psychoticism, tough-mindedness versus empathy. He believed introverts' nervous systems are more easily aroused, explaining their preference for quiet and reflection. Thus, temperament provides the raw material that environment shapes over time. Today, most psychologists describe personality through the Big Five model: openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, often remembered as OCN. These 5 dimensions appear in cultures worldwide and remain fairly stable across adulthood. Yet, research shows subtle development across the lifespan. Conscientiousness tends to rise through adulthood as people take on responsibilities. Agreeableness often increases with maturity. Extraversion and openness may decline slightly with age. Neuroticism usually decreases as people gain emotional control. In other words, traits stabilize but still evolve as life demands change. Bringing it all together, each theorist offers a different map of personality's growth. Freud saw development as a series of fixed childhood stages, where conflict shapes the adult self. Jung imagined it as lifelong individuation, integrating the many parts of the psyche into a balanced whole. Adler viewed it as continuous striving, from childhood inferiority toward mastery and social contribution. Horney described it as the lifelong quest for security and authentic relationships. Trait theorists measured personality's stability, showing how dispositions crystallize yet shift subtly with experience. Together, they form a picture of personality as both stable and dynamic, an evolving structure shaped by early experience, biological temperament, social relationships, and conscious growth. Personality, then, is not something we simply have. It's something we build through conflict and compromise, striving and learning, security and change across the entire course of life.